Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supergirl. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, it seems that someone has a grudge against Andrea, even to the point they're trying to kill her. And they ended up sending a manifesto to Catco talking about the fact is that they want to stop the launch of the lenses. And it's this complicated thing of, well, Lex is now putting Kara, Supergirl, on bodyguard duty for Andrea. Obviously, Kara knows there's something up with this, but doesn't exactly know 100% what Lex has planned. Lex is using this as an opportunity if there's a threat towards Andrea, in particular everything Obsidian related, which obviously Gemma as well as Leviathan in general are invested in it. And it's like if he can prove his worth by helping them out in this situation, then he feels he can get closer to Leviathan. I thought it was kind of interesting, the whole immortality tech situation from Toyman. I thought like Lex was going to try and apply it to himself to make him immortal. I mean, granted, that could always be a byproduct later on, but it seems like it's more so like a way of deconstructing the immortality, because obviously all the people part of Leviathan have lived for a very, very long time, so they have a form of immortality, so they want to kind of they can deconstruct it and kind of reverse engineer it, and more so in a sense of making it into a way to counteract immortality. So that's the whole plan that him and Brainy have in store, which obviously Brainy has this whole complicated thing where he's talking to one of the other Brainiacs about the situation. And for Brainy, it's like he's got for him the calculations is that basically there's like a 90% chance that he won't get invited to Thanksgiving because of the moves he's making, but the other Brainy's reassuring him is like, follow the math. The fact of the matter is everything has to go down this route. We have to help Lex, because if we don't, we won't get the future that we kind of desire. So I even love him being like, that haircut looks really good, and our Brainy's like, shut up. So it's the problem is Brainy's communicating with other people who are looking at this from a logical standpoint. The fact is, he's so logical now. I mean, that's the whole problem with Brainiac in the first place. That was kind of why your emotions. I mean, to be fair, Brainy's kind of that perfect combination of him being, a Kluan, and along with having his emotions still intact. So obviously separating him from Brainiac, but he's still so focused on the mathematics of it that he's forgetting one big calculation, and that is people themselves. People aren't something that's so easily, there's so many aspects about a human being that's not calculable. And it's like the fact of the matter is, if you told your friends the truth, who knows what they'd be able to do. The fact is, you're doing this all on your own because you're thinking mathematically everything's going to work out. But the problem is you don't account for the variable that is people. Lex is a person. Yes, you have to you're already accounting all his previous actions and stuff like that. He's going to help take down Leviathan. But the problem is you don't think about what's going to happen afterwards, because Lex is a very unpredictable person. Even though he seems predictable, he is very unpredictable. He'll lure you into a belief that everything's that, because he thinks he still has it under control, and that's Brainy's first mistake, because that shows that you're still underestimating Lex Luthor, the one person in the universe you should never underestimate. So that turns into a whole issue in itself. But it's interesting because obviously William's taken over into this story of the launch and everything, and him and Supergirl, because obviously this is their first time actually meeting and everything, and it's it's that complicated thing of Carbon, right, because obviously it's the whole thing of her and William meant to stay friends, but he's acting more than friendly-ish, bringing her a coffee, knowing exactly what she wants in her coffee and everything, and Kara feels guilty about it. But they had the conversation about the lenses. They're not fans of it. Granted, this person that's attacking Andrea, they don't align with everything that person says. But the whole worry about people being so, obviously, the message behind it. I mean, a big part of the season is people so glued into these worlds that they're creating for themselves, they're not actually going out and making direct connections with people. I mean, and that whole point ends up being the biggest crux for this episode, because it turns out the person behind all of this, her name is Amy. She lost her husband Todd, because Todd, they lost their world, their people, and they landed on this planet. And so the lenses allowed him to kind of create a reality where he got to spend time, especially because now the lenses are even crazier, because now you're able to taste and feel everything. That layer of what's real and what isn't gets a little smaller, so but this was like a prototype, and he ended up stealing it because he was so desperate to hang on to his past and everything, and because of that, he ended up getting fired, so he lost access to the lenses, and eventually he sadly ended up killing himself, and now his wife is so desperate for revenge, she got specialized gauntlets that basically make it so that she can absorb energy, even like when she was fighting Kara, when she was fighting John, she was able to kind of absorb their energy and kind of use it against them. But it's sad at the end of the day that everything she's doing, she's not trying to hurt people or kill anyone. She's just trying to stop the lenses from launching because she doesn't want history to repeat itself. What happened to her husband to happen to anyone else. But luckily, Kara was able to talk her down because a conversation between Supergirl and William earlier, because William talked about the fact that he jumped on the opportunity for the lenses because of the whole Russell situation, like, oh, he lost his best friend and everything, and he was kind of caught up in wanting to live in that life until he met Kara. That time of karaoke and game night, it made him realize, like, whoa, like, I'm trying to live I'm living in the past and everything. I need to kind of be present in the future. I mean, present day, because like there's still so much here. There's so many people around I can connect with. He had lost that connection, and being around Kara actually reinstilled that connection to him. And that's something Kara was saying, like, I understand it. You can't change the past. She literally went through this last episode like wanting to change the past, but it's like you can't change it. But the fact of the matter is, like, I get it, you want to warn people, but the fact is you doing what you're doing, it's going to hurt a lot of people, and that's not what Todd would want. And for her, she's just in so much pain, which I'm sure even Kara can understand. She can even understand where Todd's coming from, because Kara has the benefit of, even though her planet's going, the fact of the matter is there's still enough Kryptonian history left. Their people are still alive because her and her cousin are here. They keep their world alive because of that. She told Clark as much, during Crisis. And the fact of the matter is they have, Fortress of Solitude, which holds so much of their history and everything. So there's all, but I can think, she would understand too, wanting to be able to kind of live in a world where it's like, oh, here's everything again. Like, you can almost, bring back to life all those people. But at the same time, it's like, it won't be real. It's like, no matter how real it feels, it won't be real. And because of that, you're spending so much time in that world, you're missing the great opportunities, which I always find it ironic because I'm a very introverted person. So like it resonates with me at the same time, just because it's like, yeah, I'm kind of one of those people, it's the whole message of the episode just kind of resonates with me just because I am the very introverted person that I am, but that's neither here nor there. So it's just kind of an interesting element. But Andrea brings up a point later on of like, she gets where Supergirl's coming from, but at the same time, it's like, it's a horrible thing that happened to Todd, but Todd isn't just the only story. She's like, all the people that went through the trauma of like what went down because of the lenses, they were kind of able to get the help, that they needed. Cause obviously it accesses, a therapy, session as well. Cause that's what, because obviously that's a lane that, Kelly was working on when it comes to this. I mean, in fact, she's actually the one that kind of basically helped bridge that gap between the reality and the VR. She made it a little more real and everything, like the feels, the touch and everything. So it's an interesting thing. It's almost like it's a balancing act. Like the fact of the matter is it should be used as a tool. It shouldn't be used as a substitute. It's kind of like the message that and I think that's even an aspect that Kara's going to have to try and confront. Like there is good with it, just like there's bad with it. So it's more of a balancing act of not letting people get too addicted to it. That there probably needs to be a little more limitations, restrictions on it. It's just like, because if you get so caught up in that world, it's going, an analogy, it's a weird analogy for me to compare it to, but it'd be the whole Wall-E situation of like how humans became in Wall-E. It's a very different circumstances yet similar, which the reason why I say it's a weird circumstance, I actually, to this point in time, I've still never seen the movie Wall-E. I've heard good things about it. I've just never taken time to actually watch it, and I need to at some point in time, but there's a parallel about that, kind of just getting so stuck in that world and it becoming your everything. I mean, obviously there's like the Ready Player One, obviously the circumstances are a little different, but there's a lot of like other media you can kind of compare to in this regard. So it's an interesting and complicated balancing act. What I also appreciate about this episode too is Alex, because Alex is a little lost. Since leaving the DEO, she thought like, oh, I have my independence back, in the sense that like I don't have to worry about Lex being, over my head. I'm able to kind of do what I need to, kind of attacking Lex from the outside in a sense of finding out what he's up to. But the problem is, like, she feels weird because it's like for the first time in a long time, she doesn't have her sidearm, so she feels a little off guard. And she felt like, like when John was in trouble, like fighting Amy, it's like she didn't have a weapon to fight back. So it's like, it's like she felt a little powerless. But, John had to remind her, and even Kara brings it up later on, even without a weapon, you are capable. Like, the fact of the matter is, because John's like, I get it. I was lost too. But it was actually Alex that kind of brought him back to realize, like, there's more to this situation. Like, even without her badge, she can still do so much. She can still help people because she's very capable on her own. But I do appreciate the fact that John gives her a new weapon at the end, and it's pretty dope that it's literally a shape-shifting weapon. All she has to do is imagine what she wants the weapon to be, and it'll turn into. And I'm like, that's super dope. It's also kind of neat because it's almost like having a little piece of John like fighting beside you the entire time. I mean, if I be fair, she's fighting alongside of John, at Watchtower and stuff like that. I'm curious when it's all said and done, is she going to go back to the DEO or is she going to continue working with John permanently? I get the feeling she'll go back to DEO, or maybe they'll end up getting someone else entirely. I don't know. I think it'd be pretty neat either way in the grand scheme of things. But I'm curious to see in the long run what she plans to do. Another interesting byproduct of this episode is the fact that Andrea learns about her abilities. I guess they've secretly been there with her ever since she got the coin. I think the moment you touch the coin, like the ability to just naturally stays with you. But she's just, in this reality, she's never had an opportunity to use it just because Leviathan never came to her, in this new post-crisis world of using her power. So she never knew it until now. So I'm curious to see what that means for Andrea's story going forward. Like, now that she knows she's aware of these abilities, will things shift and she becomes more of a hero in this regard? I mean, she was kind of an assassin, but she's done things. She ends up talking about later on. The fact is that she did whatever she could for her father, to make sure that this business kept afloat. So she did a lot of stuff, betrayed a lot of people that she hurts. She lost a lot of friendships, obviously the biggest one being Lena. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, for her, it's like, I would do it all again because of what she's capable, what these lenses can do potentially to help people. And once again, that was her whole point. Like, I'm here to help. And it's so interesting because there's so many avenues of, like, Andrea thinking she's doing right by people. Obviously, Kara believing what she's doing is right. And at the same time, you have Lena who believes what she's doing is right, which, speaking of that, it's the whole situation of, when it's all said and done, like, obviously, Kara's words last episode have kind of got to her, making her, but she's like, no, like, Kara, when she heard I had Myriad, she thought I was trying to control people, but I'm not trying to puppeteer people. The fact of the matter is, I'm trying to, if I could get rid of all this, like, this anger and this hate and violence, it could create a utopia. But the problem is, with utopias, there's a lot of upkeep to it, because what are you going to do, the fact of the matter is, you will turn people. That is the complicated thing of, like, yes, and it's very similar to Brainy. You're not accounting for the human qualities. Yes, humans are not perfect. We have flaws, but our flaws are what make us us. And if you try to perfect humans, you're kind of stripping away you're stripping away bad qualities people have and stuff like that. But it's still, all of that combined together is what make us us. And you taking a little bit of that away, it's kind of like taking a little bit of chipping away at someone. Like, I get it. It's a complicated thing because it's like you're getting rid of the negative aspects of a human being, but it's almost like you're trying to make people into something that they're not, because you have this ideal version of what humans should be, but it's like, who are you to judge people to be who you think they should be? It's like, people should be allowed to make mistakes, because if you're not allowed to make those mistakes, you're not allowed to grow, So it's like you're trying to create people to be perfect, but they're not perfect. We're perfectly imperfect, if anything, so that's what's just so interesting about it. And I think Lena's just not recognizing that, because she's so obsessed with what she believes is kind of like, because she's still coming at this from a place of, oh, I was hurt by Supergirl. I was hurt by my best friend. She lied to me. She manipulated me. And you're still using that as a foundation. But even Kara was like, going forward, like, don't use me as a justification for your actions. You're responsible for your own actions. Don't call upon me to be the trigger for, why you do what you do. So, but, she's very dead set in what she's doing, and obviously Lex sets it up so there's willing participants in a prison, which we had the return of Steve, because we haven't seen Steve in a while. I want to say last season? I want to say was the last time we saw him in that one episode. I think he might have popped up more than once, but every time I see that actor, I'm just like, even as Steve, I'm like, Mozzie. Just, I know that's always the sucky thing with actors, where you kind of get stuck looking at someone, or like using Melissa Benoist for example. No matter what she does, for the great career I'm sure she's going to continue to have and everything, it's like, she's always going to be Supergirl in my eyes. Like, I know that sucks, and but I don't mean it like I'm always going to be like, oh, Supergirl. Instead of saying Melissa, I'm not going to be like, oh, Supergirl. It's like, no, but in my eyes, sadly, that's always going to be a thing of like, there's always going to be a part of my heart that's like, oh, like, that's Supergirl, It's like whoever takes the role in the future, like whether it be in movies or whatever they plan to do with the character in the future, Melissa will always be my Supergirl, So it's one of those things. Once again, I'm going on a tangent, stuff like that. I mean, the same thing literally applies to everyone else. Like, obviously, you get in the complicated nature of like, well, who's your Flash? I'm like, I like Grant and Ezra. Like, I can have multiple Flashes. Much like I can have multiple Supergirls if anyone else ends up picking up the mantle, like I would say most likely in the form of a movie at some point in time if the DC decides to go down that route. Who knows? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I mean, I'm not against stuff. Once again, I'm going on a tangent. We'll save that for a conversation for a video in itself. But I just think it's interesting. But regardless, like circling back to what I was bringing up, Lena experimenting on prisoners, trying to ease some of that, evil away, and it's like, oh, it works at first. It's like, oh, even that dude that messes with Steve all the time, Toby, it's like, oh, it works. But then it has a negative connotation because there's an aspect about the human condition that Lena didn't account for. It's like she accounted for like the aggression side of people, sure, but there was another part of the brain that like retribution and revenge. Like for him, like Steve, it's like he felt this fear because he always felt like, it's like for once now he wanted to be the bully. He wanted like, oh, I'm in a powerful position, like I want to pay you back now. So Lena didn't account for all of that. And even Lex had talked about the fact is his obsession with Superman ended up being his downfall, but now he has a second chance to make things right between him and Lena and just the entire world. That's what this is meant to be for him, because like Lena had brought up the whole conversation about like when he basically turned the yellow sun into a red sun, which would have killed a ton of people. But in his means of trying to destroy Superman, she's like, you were so deluded then to believe that you were on the right side of things. What if I'm in the same way? But Lex is like, no, like Supergirl might not believe in what you believe in, but I do. He's saying like the fact of the matter is, you see things from a certain perspective, and it's like you have to kind of continue believing in what you want to do because you're right. You have good intentions with what you're doing. Once again, always that phrase I use a lot: good intentions, road to hell, and all that. So it's that. And for me personally, I'm like, it's kind of complicated. I mean, the fact is, Lex is like, she willingly takes Lex's help, which is like, oh, you are potentially going down that darker road. It's a slippery slope because Lex has his own intentions. And part of me is like, oh, you're letting him work on it? Yeah, there's probably some secret codes or something he's putting in there. Hell, even Brainy had to deal with that this episode because he was trying to disable like the launch because basically while the power was being drained, Obsidian kept like, there was a failsafe to basically make it like the launch would siphon energy from the city to kind of compensate for it to make sure the launch went through, but that would have meant like a lot of stuff getting overheated, explosions. It would have ended bad for a whole bunch of people getting killed. And the way Brandy puts it was like 66% of National City would have gotten hurt because of it, but because someone had put something in place, and I was like, oh, was that Leviathan that did it? But it's like, no, it was Lex, and Lex doing that to make sure everything went on without a hitch. But it's like, yeah, because Supergirl said today, because Brandon was like, it only worked out because Supergirl, if Supergirl hadn't saved the day, he's like, but Supergirl would have. It's like, and even if that was the case, a few houses would have burned down. So it's showing, it's still that thing of Brainy's working with, but you still more and more with Brainy, it becomes harder and harder to continue down this path. And ultimately, it's going to be his undoing because obviously, Alex is going to continue to look into this situation. I mean, because he lied to Alex and John, they went into that situation unprepared. They weren't expecting someone to be there. They wanted to still investigate, but like he could have given them the heads up. But the whole purpose was, oh, it needs to go down the way things are going. Like there needs to be an attack on Andrea so Supergirl can protect them. So that because I think I was about to literally call him Lex, obviously played by John Cryer. I think I was literally about to call him by his real name, but Lex would have his plan to get closer to Gemma wouldn't have worked out. So that's a whole thing in itself. So, but it's that complicated balancing act that a lot of people are dealing with now. But Kara, interestingly enough, after this situation, because of her fears from the previous situation about having to lie to people and stuff like that, like it made her afraid to take those steps forward. She admits that the fact is that she's kind of running away from reality as well. So it's like, well, what's one dinner going to hurt? So she takes William up on this offer, because even Alex was like, obviously he still likes you and everything. So, kind of taking that step forward, and what that means in the grand scheme of things, we're gonna have to wait to see ultimately. But I think it's pretty sweet. But at the same time, like, Lex is a step closer with Gemma, even going as far as be like, let me be the face of representation for Obsidian. That way, you and your partners, all you get to stay in the shadows while I'll be out front, kind of doing all the heavy lifting for you. Which is like, all I want at the end of the day is meet your friends. And she's like, well, if you do what you're supposed to, then fine, I'll make that happen potentially. I'm like, okay. So steps are being taken forward in all directions in that regard. But I'm very interested to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.